The reviews are rolling in fast for the Joker sequel, and yeah, it's not looking great. And while the movie is getting some positive reviews here and there, the concept is one that they had to prove why it needed to exist. Did the Arthur Fleck of 2019 need a larger story? That's the challenge that they faced when making this film, and both Joaquin Phoenix and director Todd Phillips were excited about this challenge because that idea scared them.
Todd said something about if it doesn't scare the life out of you, what's the point in doing it?
With that being said, let's dive into the incredibly interesting production of Joker Folie, Deux, from the concept into the hidden VFX, and potentially gain more insights into what made this film a success for some and futile for others. Joker was originally proposed as a standalone film with no sequels or future tie-ins in mind, something Warner Brothers made a point of emphasizing when the film was being promoted and after it released. The film turned out to be quite the surprise. Although it received mixed critical views, it shocked many at the box office, including the Warner Brothers brass, by raking in a worldwide total of $1.7 billion at the box office, making it Warner Brothers' biggest box office opening in 2 years, and at the same time, the highest grossing R-rated film ever, only being toppled from that throne years later by Deadpool and Wolverine. The movie, of course, went on to be nominated for several Oscars, with Joaquin Phoenix winning an award for Best Actor.
Hi. Stop. Hi. God, I'm full of so much gratitude right now. And I do not feel elevated above any of my fellow nominees or anyone in this room.
Audiences were captivated by the film's more realistic portrayal of the Joker, a man pushed to the breaking point by an uncaring society. But of course, things weren't all positive, with the film getting its fair share of bad press, too.
The movie won't hit theaters until next week, but Joker is already earning rave reviews, and now a disturbing warning.
Is it just me, or is it getting crazier out there?
Army officials at Fort Sill, Oklahoma are alerting soldiers about possible mass shootings at theaters showing the film. Though there are no specific plots, Texas law enforcement has told officials about potential threats made on social media.
With concerns about whether audiences would be too sympathetic to Arthur Fleck, moral panics over whether the film's violent content would inspire the next mass shooter, or just a general trashing of the film's tone and Joaquin's acting.
The problem with this film, what I didn't expect, was the discourse that happened before they saw the movie, and I found that to be a little bit too much, because people were making assumptions about a movie. They were writing think pieces about a movie that they hadn't seen. The first 3 sentences of their think pieces were, I haven't seen the movie, I don't plan on seeing the movie, I don't need to see the movie, but this is why it shouldn't have been made.
But a lot of that criticism only fed the film's underdog appeal. All of this controversy and success led us to the inevitable question: will there be a sequel? In true Joaquin Phoenix fashion, the answer comes from somewhere unorthodox. Before filming had even wrapped on the first Joker, he had a dream.
The dream is not inspired the movie. The dream was just, I had this dream that I was performing as Joker and doing songs.
This unused idea of a musical Joker didn't go anywhere at the time, but it stayed in Joaquin's mind as something captivating to him. After Joker wrapped, Phoenix found himself gripped by the Joker character, saying he can't stop thinking about it, and had begun to see it as a kind of dream role. But at the time, director Todd Phillips made it clear that while he was open-minded to ideas on where to take the character, the film hadn't been set up as a sequel, and there were no plans in the works. "We have no plans for a sequel," the quote was. "I will do anything Joaquin wants to do, and I would, but the movie's not set up to have a sequel. We always pitched it as one movie, and that's it." But in November 2019, it seemed like there was going to be movement, as The Hollywood Reporter broke a story that a sequel was underway. But on the same day, they had to retract that story. In response to the false report, Phillips admitted that he and Joaquin and executives from Warner Brothers had been talking about it, and the executives were prodding them to consider a follow-up. But there was nothing concrete, and he would call the reports anticipatory at best. One idea they did contemplate was zeroing in on the musical idea that Joaquin had dreamed up by creating a Joker Broadway show, but Phillips was put off when thinking about the amount of effort required to make it happen, and the amount of work Joaquin would have to put in. On film, you do as many takes as needed, and that's it. The shoot is done. But for a Broadway show, you would have to at least commit to doing the same scenes for months and months on end. The Broadway concept was ultimately derailed by the COVID pandemic, which would quiet the discord surrounding Joker for almost 2 years. That was until June 2022 when Phillips finally announced that the sequel was in development, revealing the title name of Joker, Folie à Deux, Madness for Two, in an Instagram post.
The pandemic starts and we're all locked away, and I'm start going, maybe we should do a sequel, and I start texting Joaquin and we just start talking about it. So pretty early on, and then I said, well, let me go off with Scott Silver, who I write these movies with.
The newly appointed head of DC, James Gunn, followed this up by announcing Joker 2 as part of the new Elseworlds projects. Elseworld being the DC codename for projects outside of their main franchise continuity.
Matt Reeves' Batman or Todd Phillips' Joker or Teen Titans Go, that it is clearly labeled as DC Elseworlds, outside of the mainstream DCU continuity.
For this film, the question was how to go about delivering on a sequel that felt fresh, picking up Joaquin's musical idea. But Phillips and his co-writer Scott Silver also decided to add Joker's sidekick, who was his sidekick ever since the 1990s show Batman the Animated Series.
Harley?
Ha, ha, ha.
We of course are talking about Harley Quinn, who would be played by Lady Gaga. Their moments of madness are where the music comes in, with the musical numbers essentially acting as a hallucinatory expression
I have someone who needs me.
of Arthur and Harley's minds. Something Phillips describes as Arthur not having the words to say what he wants to say, so he sings them instead. Most of the music in the movie is just really dialogue. This dynamic makes the film different to other musicals, where everyone spontaneously bursts into pitch-perfect songs as part of the world.
I wouldn't necessarily say that this is actually a musical. In a lot of ways, it's very different. The way that music is used is to really give the characters a way to express what they need to say, because the scene and just the dialogue is not enough. Forget your troubles, come on, get happy. Better chase all your cares away. For me, it was a lot about kind of unlearning technique and forgetting how to breathe and allowing the song to completely come out of the character.
Filming would begin on December 2022, which was marked by director Todd Phillips releasing a photo of Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, getting a shave with the caption, "Day One, Our Boy." Returning again as the director of photography was cinematographer Lawrence Sher. After both he and director Todd Phillips took inspiration from the look and feel of the films like Taxi Driver for the first film, he would look to a different sort of inspiration, a musical. This film from director Francis Ford Coppola is infamous mostly for being a flop musical with a less than stellar narrative, but what it is remembered for is the vibrant depiction of Las Vegas and the cinematography. This was sort of the look he wanted to go for, saying, "I broke that down for the new Joker so that it was part of the conversation. Whether those images ended up really influencing the new one, in part, maybe they did. They became a conversation starter for me and Mark Friedberg, the production designer, and Todd, as we scouted in those early days. Even if it's not a reference that you're going to take on set and say, I want it to look like that, it's like brain food, it's dream food." And that really showed up in this film with colorful elements that were not often present in the last film, with Lawrence Sher building upon some of his beautiful cinematography of the first film with colorful shots, intriguing overhead shots. But just like the last film, they would forego using film cameras and utilize the Alexa 65. But unlike the last go-around, they would get to distribute it in IMAX 70mm film in 11 select theaters around the world, adding it to a very exclusive list of films that have been released in IMAX's 1.43:1 aspect ratio. Warner Brothers is not generally a studio that likes to release a lot of the behind-the-scenes materials around the release of a film, but we can see from a lot of the photographs and videos taken that correlate with a lot of similar elements to how the first movie was filmed. Just this time with a larger budget, of course. While nothing is truly definitive, we can make much better guesses thanks to the curious residents of LA and New York, and of course taking a look at the VFX they did for this movie later on. Joker 2 is going to explore the blurred lines between the judicial process, criminality, sensationalism, and entertainment, which prompted the crew to stage protests in front of the court. In this case, the timing was rather unfortunate, as it just so happened that former President Trump was just arrested after his first indictment. And that left people wondering why protesters were wearing clown masks all of a sudden. Residents were dumbfounded, wondering what all the fuss was about. One resident who was interviewed by Vulture put things like this: "It's a New York moment. a real protest next to a fake protest for a film. We didn't know which one the cops were here for.
Oftentimes when you're coming to the end of a film, you're like, I want it over, I'm done. I didn't want it to end.
That's a wrap, posted Todd Phillips on the 6th of April in 2023. Joker, Folie Deux finally entered the editing and post-production phase. Similar to the first movie, it's a bit difficult to tell where the VFX could be applied. But don't worry, however, as we did some prying regardless. According to IMDb, before the release of Joker 2, 6 different VFX houses were employed to work on the Joker sequel. Like before, Scanline VFX seems to be at the forefront of the visual effects for this film, and the credits include attributions to 3D artists, environment generalists, and match moving amongst other things, which paints us a good picture as to what Scanline more than likely did on this film. Set extensions, rig removals, and everything invisible visual effects. As for the set extensions, we tried finding some examples to do a before and after, before Warner Brothers or Scanline VFX could create one. For this, we checked multiple locations, such as the New York Supreme Court, the New York skyline, and the LA downtown streets Arthur Fleck and his impersonator were spotted running down. With the New York Supreme Court and skyline, we didn't have much luck. But when finding the LA crossing the crew shot on, we finally found something worth showcasing. This chase sequence looks rather natural, and you could easily mistake it for not featuring any post-production trickery. One of the largest alterations to the image was the set extension and building replacements of the street Joaquin was seen running down, with the street further down appearing to be more opened up, and the silhouettes of the building not narrowing down to form a straight and narrow divot of the sky. The final composite, on the other hand, features a whole new set of buildings in the back of the street. There's a certain point at which the buildings in the back have been painted out and new 3D buildings were erected, the process of which likely looking similar to first Joker film. For the first Joker film, LiDAR 3D scans were created of many exteriors and interior environments. The main benefit of those being the artists can easily track a 3D double of the environment onto the two-dimensional video recordings. This makes it easier to erase elements out of an image and track things like new billboards over old signs, and is handy for estimating the depth of the scene. When we look at the Google Street View image of the street again, we can spot certain signs on the left side, which look very different in the film. If no behind-the-scenes recordings existed, we wouldn't be able to tell if those signs had been physically altered for the shoot or not. But luckily, we have more material to work with, like this video with the insightful citizen journalist commentary.
Oh, are we rolling again? Are we gonna get it right this time?
Here we can observe that the signs on the left of the street weren't replaced or partially taken off. They were left as is. In the end, all of this is worth pointing out because of how well done the visual effects for both Joker films came together. To most viewers, you would never think of these films as having a lot of visual effects work in them. But that's the point. And it's these films that the VFX artists should get a lot of credit for, especially as the director and Warner Brothers don't ever really talk about the visual effects in some of these films. In the end, Joker Folie Deux has received more mixed reactions from critics, but seems to be on its way to a decent box office return. For me personally, I'm not sure it was a necessary film to make, as I don't think we really needed another sequel. I think there's a lot of people that agree with that. But out of all the ways to make a sequel in today's heavy IP dominating cinematic world, it's commendable that director Todd Phillips took a wild swing and gave audiences something completely different than the first film. Whether you enjoyed that wild swing is another conversation altogether. But as we were all leaving the IMAX theater, we had an interesting question pop up. How many IMAX films were actually released in 1.43:1 aspect ratio on IMAX 70mm film? Well, you can check out that video right here.